Aisha says they need to break up. He was surprised and thought it was a joke, but she is telling the plain truth. This is the end of their relationship. Before he can finish speaking, he falls to the ground. The girl worriedly asks if he is all right. Jarines says he loved her and still does, and thought it was mutual. Jarines is from a squad of knights of the imperial court. He is a brave warrior who led the country to victory. In his battles, the guy relied only on armor and sword, and now he cries kneeling before her. The protagonist realizes that she likes him, but remembers that her goal now is to break up with him. Guy assumes it is because of his status, or because he is the heir to an earl and a knight, and she is a commoner nurse. Jarines reminds her that origin doesn't matter for their love, but as it turns out, the reason for such a decision of the girl was something else. Then he assumes that it was because of the bride, but the guy broke the engagement to date Aisha. But the reason was something else. The guy doesn't understand what the reason is. Aisha replied that it's because she doesn't love him. At this point, she thinks that if this continues, it will never end, and she doesn't know how to tell Jarines the truth. The guy doesn't believe her, and clarified that then all her words were lies about him. At this point, the protagonist doesn't know how to tell him that she was only going for her goal. So she says that she has no excuses, let him blame her, but they need to break up. Jarines says that it is impossible, because at that place he made a promise to Aisha before the final battle, when he thought they would see each other for the last time. The guy swore his love for her. Jarines said only death would separate them, and jumped down from the tower. Aisha falls to her knees and screams in internal pain. She can't believe this happened. This has never happened before. She doesn't understand who would want such a twist, and screams for the creator to come out. Only Jump Jarines, the protagonist of this game. It became unclear at what point things went wrong. 2 days ago, Kim Hyun-sub found a great izakaya for tonight's party. The employees pretend to be excited about the company dinner. He asks if everyone can go, and those who can't, have them raise their hands and starts counting to 3. Supervisor Lee replies that he's going home. Kim Hyun-sub says that since she joined them, she has never attended a corporate dinner party. She reminds him that the company guarantees to leave work on time, complimenting that Rigveda is leading on the world stage because it doesn't take personal time for its employees. Kim Hyun replies that no one has canceled the attachment to work. They don't stick to the old-fashioned culture, and it was influenced by firing employees enforcing old customs. The girl asked that if you think about it, he's going to retire soon, right? Lee Young-ah, the HR department of a leading IT company, Rigveda, is an expert on layoffs, nicknamed Guillotine. Kim Hyun. From the surprise of the question, he suddenly remembers that he has a meeting today and the corporate party will be arranged another time. However, the girl is happy that she can leave work on time, and her colleagues wonder why it is so important for her to leave on time and assume that maybe she is hiding a guy at home. Indeed, there is such a guy. Lee Yoon-ah hides him in her monitor. She is a relationship simulator blogger with 10 years of experience and specializes as a dating simulator player, having 100% success in them. The girl's favorite game lately is Knights of Khaleesi. The essence is that the player becomes a member of the medical squad called to help, and Knights Khaleesi, and the main goal is to win the war and return to the imperial court. The girl has a high level, and it was all difficult for her. After a long hard work, saving and downloading, she achieved the goal of 100%. She made Reno her own. Now Lee Yoon-ah is left with only Mr. Stonewall, who no one has been able to charm yet. The head of the imperial court's knight squad, Reno Brecht. And to get her a new hero, you have to start the game from the beginning, but for the sake of her favorite character, she is ready. The girl with passion begins to pass this quest. But suddenly, technical work began. She jumped on the bed with disappointment and noticed that there was a package waiting for her, which she forgot to open after work. In the package was a note of congratulations, saying that she was the first to charm Reno. She was selected as a beta tester for the second update of the game. In order to participate, the girl needed to sign a contract and log in. At the end of the letter, it was from the creator of the game. Lee Yoon-ah wondered how he knew that today was the day she would be able to get Reno and how he got her address. but the girl immediately turned her attention to the beta test, which meant that she would be the first to play the second update and happily decided to try it. The girl simply had to take and attach this technology to her temples. She did not hesitate to turn on the device, and then she did not know yet that she would regret the choice she had made. The main character opened her eyes from the bright sunlight that shone on her. She was puzzled because it had just been night. But then the girl got out of bed and didn't realize where she was. The girl is greeted by a guy in the world of Calicia. For some reason, he seems very familiar to her and looked like the NPS Igor in the game. The girl looks in the mirror and realizes that she became Aisha. The protagonist is caught in the second update of the game. The guy says that the reception for the return of the knights will be held tonight, and she needs to answer her escort. Aisha doesn't understand who he's talking about. The guy replies that it's up to her to decide. And around the room are large bouquets of flowers, on which are envelopes with invitations. In one of these envelopes was a letter from Count Reno. Aisha is angry because such things are sent only to their lovers. She does not understand why they sent all this to her. Igor replies that they want to go to the reception with her, and for optimal beta testing, he transferred all the saved data of the guillotine. The girl realizes that she's meeting all the characters she's enchanted with, thinking that, in the second update, you can date more than one. But Igor replies that the system is exactly the same as she played with before. Then the protagonist concludes that as long as sympathy for one hero is established, then the other does not appear in the game. The guy replies that this is the case and that there are no changes to this. At this point, Aisha realizes that she will not be able to meet her favorite character, Ren Brecht. Aisha suddenly passes out. The guy is perplexed, yanking her around and going through the 5 stages of accepting the inevitable. She suddenly replies that it's the depression stage. Igor says there's no time for that. Suddenly, he reminds the girl of that sad day when she fled the burning village. Igor says it was because she was born with a royal mark, the mark of King Calicia. When a marked child was born in the village, it was ordered to be wiped out to find out the truth. And Aisha, having hidden the royal mark, joins the medical aid squad, all for the sake of uncovering the secret of the king who ordered the massacre in Garthia. Igor asks if she wasn't supported by so many knights, but that's no support for Aisha. Igor says whatever it is, the girl should use everything, hinting at whether she has something other than the king's mark, tenacity, and gratuitous popularity. Aisha calls him a smiling jerk and is upset that the game she's not destined to meet her favorite character, reflecting that if she avoids the male characters until the very end, she will be able to see her favorite one. Igor says that a carriage has been sent for her and asks her if she is ready. Aisha asks in surprise who did it, and the guy replies that all 3 of them did. She suddenly feels like she's going crazy. Garin's coachman was the very first to arrive. He was speaking on behalf of the Knight of Radiance from the beneficent squad of knights of the imperial court, Count Stanfolk. And here begins the argument between the coachman about who arrived first. Getting into a polemic between the coachman of Reno and Jarines, the coachman of Helios says that he doesn't understand what the discussion is about and that they arrived later than he did. A scuffle starts between the coachmen. One of them says how he can justify his pathetic behavior. The other shouts that they are petty. The third says everything will be solved if they stop the carriage. But then a man intervened, asking what was going on here. The coachmen were blocking His Majesty's way, which meant they had committed treason. It was Ren Brecht, the head of the Imperial Court Knights troop. The boys apologize and say they just wanted to escort the lady to the reception. Ren says they were mistaken, as the nobles' quarters are in the northern part. They replied that they are sorry, but the lady they came for is from the military camp. Miss Aisha, a member of the medical aid squad, Ren is surprised and thinks about the fact that he didn't know they had such a taste. Then the guy says that the coachmen will get it from their masters. They turn their heads and see Miss Aisha running away. Everyone shouts for her to stop. But then Ren Brecht stops them and tells them to think properly, because their day will end with a reprimand from their masters or arrest for treason. The coachmen reply that they will get out of the way now, as they are very frightened by Ren's words. Aisha will hide until the reception is over. She goes up the stairs and thinks she is going to die. It is difficult for her to go up, and all her thoughts are about how much she misses the elevator. The main character goes up and sees the beauty. She looks with mesmerizing eyes and thinks that exactly from here, there was a grandiose view. Suddenly, the girl is called by a man's voice. Aisha turns around and sees Gurines. The girl forgot about the fact that at the top of the tower usually appeared Count Gurines' Stelfolk. The type of hero is a retriever. He is obedient and active, so it was easiest to charm him. The protagonist thought that everyone went to the reception. The guy suddenly asks about her avoiding him. Aisha replied that such a thing was impossible, because then she wouldn't be here. Then Gurines misunderstood her, but the girl did not answer the letter, and his carriage returned empty. Gurines was afraid that she had grown cold to him and came here. Her outfit reminded him of the night they had confirmed their love. Aisha is surprised that they had such a thing too. The protagonist reasoned that if you can't meet another hero while you're in a relationship, doesn't it mean that if she breaks up with her current partner, she'll get a chance to date her favorite? They spend the night together. Aisha is sorry and confesses to being a guillotine. The protagonist thinks that a breakup is no different than getting fired. The girl thanks Gurines for his hard work and will keep in her heart all that he has done for her. Aisha thinks it's time for them to take another step forward and move on to new life stages. The guy happily agreed, assuming she was talking about marriage. Aisha vehemently replied no, and that here and now their paths with Gurines were diverging. The guy became sad, and he does not understand what is the matter, Aisha. He seemed at this moment so cute with puppy eyes, but the girl repeated that they need to part. At that moment, the protagonist suddenly realized everything, remembered at once how Gurines fell from the tower, but assumed that quitting and parting are completely different things. A man's voice shouted at her to move away from the tower, and Aisha saw Renbrecht. Suddenly, her assistant appeared, shaking the girl, telling her to pull herself together. The protagonist asked how Igor knew she was here. The guy replied that with the help of tracking magic, and complimented that it was not the time to get distracted, pointing to the fact that the girl should leave soon, otherwise everyone will think that it is her handiwork. Aisha was frightened, but Igor consoled her that luckily at such a high altitude, most likely no one saw anything. The girl replied that except for one person, remembering Ren's eyes. The protagonist screaming asks if it is possible to teleport. The guy replies that the game knights Khaleesi strive for realism. Aisha is upset thinking that it could be neglected now. The girl turned to Igor and clarified. When he said that the game system has not changed, Igor confirmed it. But Aisha that she had just met with Renbrecht. Igor replied that it was most likely because of the change in the game itself. The protagonist thinks the change was caused by the death of Gurines. She remembers him with red eyes, holding a red petal where he stood and called her by name. The parade is about to begin. His Majesty has put a lot of work into it, said Helios, the secretary of the imperial palace, speculates about being an incredibly good man, but celebrating the return of the knights and the palace alive. But then he is interrupted by Ren, saying that the ceremony has been stopped, but the rumors remain. Ren asks what rumors, and Helios tells him that he did it with a noblewoman for love because the family didn't approve of the marriage, and that Lady Louise seemed to like those rumors. Helios reasoned that people unfamiliar with Countess Louise would not be able to follow her into society, and this is also Garina's mother. It would be difficult if she started commanding the guards. The boy asks Ren to tell him when the information comes. Ren thinks back to Aisha's hair. He thinks back to her and holding the red petal in his hands. Ren says he will go there now and schedule Helios's work later. Helios tells him to let him wait because the ceremony starts soon. Aisha stands looking out the window and notices the coffin being carried, and she is surprised because it can't be. Igor asked her to calm down and that the girl is not guilty of anything. Aisha said that the guy who has everything he wants jumped because of a woman. Igor interrupts her and replies that that's the problem. Garina's never missed a thing. Igor speculates about whether or not Garina's was rejected at all, the first time he ever ended a relationship with someone he loved, and compliments that of course he would be shocked. Aisha reflects on the fact that no one falls in love like the characters in this game. Such a straightforward rejection. The girl has played very different games 10 years in a row, and it seems that she simply does not know how to properly reject people. And Igor is happy to confirm the words of the heroine. Aisha gets the idea to reboot. Igor is shocked, and she suggests rolling back to the save, back to when Garina's hadn't jumped off yet. The guy replied that there's probably no such thing in this beta test, but the protagonist doesn't believe it, saying that it can't happen. Igor shows the paragraph and the part that says that these tests are not saved, so you can't go back or quit until you pass the game. Aisha starts to get angry and says that they are frauds, that she didn't see it there. But then she remembers that she did sign the contract and just didn't pay attention to it. The girl glanced at it. Aisha can't get out until she finishes the game, and she's furious because the climax is still at least a week away. She doesn't understand what to do. Igor says this story is until the second update. After that, it changes a bit. The girl clarifies what changes. Igor replied that their goal is to freely choose love and that this game will end when Aisha finds true love. Her nickname Guillotine has quite a long history. The protagonist was once in love with a guy. He loved her for so long, offered her to go to a cafe before school, pursued her as best he could. But her pattern is to blow everyone off. Aisha can just be approached by a guy asking if she has a minute, and she responds sharply and negatively to everyone, so people started calling her Guillotine. But that doesn't mean she doesn't care about love. The girl reflects on the fact that the love simulator started out the same way. Recall traits and then find their lover, a game they must complete. But Aisha wasn't interested in love, which is why love is complicated for her. Love is there, but it is difficult for the protagonist, because finding true love without instruction or at least notation. Before she could finish, Ren Brecht appears and asks what true love she is talking about. The girl hears his voice, turns around and sees him. The guy asks if she believes in it. She opens her mouth with surprised eyes looking at Ren Brecht. Aisha began to address him as captain, and Ren claimed that it seems Jareen's believed since he died because of the one who did not let a tear at the funeral. The guy continued his monologue about the fact that the one who survived the war against 10 million troops and the terrible cold died because of love. At this point, the girl stood and just kept silent, looking at him with her hand to her face, as when addressing the captain. Ren was talking about how stupid it was. The girl looked at him and thought about how incredible he was, seeing his lashes and eyes the color of sunsets. From the first meeting, Aisha's heart begins to blaze, and she has a desire to win. The girl wants to destroy the one whom no one dares to attack. The protagonist is sure that this is the right mission of true love. Aisha notices that she is in chains. She does not understand what is happening. Ren starts to say that after he adjusts, the knight's restraints immediately detains her. The girl is puzzled and starts to say that it is not possible to detain people like this, while demanding a lawyer to show her the warrant for her arrest. The people there were puzzled. The man asks where to find the nurses. One of the heroines says she is here and asks what happened. The man says he is looking for Aisha Lidberg. The heroine replies that she is not here right now and to point out who is looking for her, and she will tell Aisha personally. The man replies that Lady Louise, the wife of the Earl of Walls, is looking for her. Ren tells him not to let anyone into the rooms and not to let anyone into the nearby halls either. Aisha turns to him and says that he has detained her, but where she is doesn't look like a prison. Aisha's thoughts at this point are that maybe it's his office, and she thinks she'll know for sure if she sees the sword the king gave him. Ren sits down looking at her and says that he thinks Aisha is a criminal until they hear an explanation. The protagonist doesn't understand what she has done wrong. Ren explained that she was indirectly involved in the death of Knight Gareens. In parallel, the girl recalls a tough interview during her student days, repeats his question, and replies that she is not guilty. She can only prove it if he asks her. Ren claimed that although Gareens had a lot of power, he treated everyone the same, a man who can't love one. She stiffened and thought about the fact that it seemed Gareens was doing just as she said. Of course, Gareens isn't the type to hold on to the love of another, and Ren Brecht wonders why he fell in love with Aisha specifically, and ended up like this. In her mind, she thinks that all because the girl was hanging around on the outskirts of the doll, but she couldn't answer him like that. Aisha thinks what answer could satisfy him, to say that she was the only one who understood him, because Gareens was gentle. Unlike his mother, He hated her, but at the same time, he loved her. The person who helped him escape his mother's arms and grow up was Aisha, but she answers Ren that she was just helping him like a nurse to come to terms with his weaknesses. Aisha states that she knows that the right-wing knights of the imperial palace have weaknesses that no one suspects, and the captain, who everyone calls Knight, the assassin, has them too. Ren doesn't realize what weaknesses they are talking about. They were separated by heavy snow as they marched through the arete. What would happen if they had these weaknesses? And he continues, so if she is telling the truth, then let her prove that every strong man has weaknesses. If Aisha can't prove, then he will throw another offense for insulting her, and still the fear of the challenge made her nervous. The protagonist asks if he knows what Gart is. Ren assumes it's the name of a village wiped off the map 10 years ago. The girl replies that it was a punishment for them plotting treason. But the guy couldn't know since he was ordered to massacre the king he served. Ren suddenly remembered the story of the protagonist he saw in the prologue of the game he served. Remembering the story of Aisha seen in the beginning of the game, the punishment of the village. Failed because she is alive, the girl suddenly replied sharply. Aisha says that the traitors who threatened His Majesty's existence have returned to the center of the commission. Listening to all this, he started to pull out his sword from its sheath and presented it to her throat, and says that if this is true, he needs to report it immediately. The girl starts to apologize and mentioned how he got angry as soon as it came to His Majesty's safety, going on to say that weakness that prevents one from making the right choice is also weakness. The girl asks if that's proof enough. The guy replies that this foolishness has passed, but that in the future she should refrain from foolishness towards His Majesty, and goes back to the matter at hand. Ren starts to think that there must have been some kind of glitch and he is still alive, the traitor they killed in the massacre at Garda. Aisha replies that it's not foolishness and says in a raised tone that he is really alive. Ren looks her in the eye and asks her to tell her everything. The girl replies that she can't just give such information to him, even though they are not a couple, but can be together in another sense. Ren asked what the price was, saying that they could be battle partners or just friends. The girl replied that he should go to the ball with her. The culmination of the Knights of Khaleesi is the Emperor's Ball. Aisha will reveal the secrets of the massacre of Garante. Well, more important here is the ball partner, because the ball ends with a vow of eternal love with him. Aisha says they should be about the couple, but Igor said that the story adjusts to the changes and says to Renbrecht, agree. He doesn't know what she means. She pointed out that it's a place where people gather and dance. Ren pointed out that the noble girls there have to memorize the rules of etiquette and asks if Aisha knows how to dance. The girl last danced back in middle school, but he interrupts and says he doesn't want to go there arguing that Lady Louise will be there. The protagonist assumes that if he brought her up, it means he's already heard about the rumors and figured it out. Ren mentioned that since he is the commander of the Paladin Knights, that he should guard His Majesty. They looked at each other. Aisha claimed that it was normal, and Ren that it was definitely not normal. The girl is angry, at which point Count Bertrand Russell Reno walks in and says that there are strange rumors about her being alone, and that it's hard to get even Knights of the Order in there without registering, not to mention an old friend. Count Bertrand Russell Reno, he is one of the protagonists of the Knights of Khaleesi. He cuts off Aisha and Ren's dialogue midway through. Renbrecht says that he supported him out of reach of others, and Count Reno replies that no one will stop him, and he is the second man of the palace after the leader. Count Reno takes Aisha's hand and kisses it healthily with her. He was surprised to hear that the girl was taken away, and clarifying if all the misunderstandings are solved, Renbrecht answers almost. But Aisha seems to think that it's better not to solve everything at once, as it all adds interest to the relationship. Count Reno talks about how he has been looking for her since this morning. Aisha is puzzled, and the guy asks the girl if she would do him the honor of going to the ball with him. Renbrecht mentioned that she wanted to go to the ball, so let her agree, but in fact, she only wanted to go with Renbrecht. The protagonist feels that she needs to calm down and then she can politely refuse, but the Count asks if she has forgotten her promise. Aisha doesn't understand what he's talking about. Count Reno says he remembers the day they confessed their love to each other and the promises they made all night. Aisha was furious and said it was nonsense, and rudely replied to the Count that she would go, but only to shut up. The Count turned to Ren, saying that he and the protagonist were leaving him because they had a lot to talk about. Ren Brecht addressed Aisha and reminded her that he was willing to listen to stories even for a different price, saying it in time for them to leave and close the door behind them. Aisha was walking with Count Reno by the hand, her eyes stinging, the girl thinking that no one would think they were on a date because of her outfit. The guy pulls up the dress of the protagonist with care to keep her warm. The girl angrily replied to the Count that she is his colleague and not a lady to accompany him. Aisha reminds him that they are friends, and the guy claims that since things are no different now and they are going to the ball together, everyone should know that he and she are a couple. The girl claims that he did it on purpose, and Reno clarifies that she heard about it. She reminds him that the guy lied about spending the night together. The Count mentioned that it's because his charm doesn't work on her. Actually, Reno, a real man, is a playboy who lost both eyes in battle, one of the best paladin knights, a man using his charm the best. Although the attitude of the protagonist to him is good, but they are far from a couple, the Count apologizes to Aisha. She almost achieved what she wanted, but could not imagine that she would meet him like this. The girl asks why he lied to the commander. The guy replies that he should have explained it at the last meeting. Count Reno considers only Aisha special and confesses that he wants and loves only her. The Count could not allow Aisha to go to the ball with someone else, even if it is his friend, chief and commander of knights, and even if it is the man she loves. The girl was puzzled. Of course he was her favorite character. Reno clarified if Aisha was pretending to listen to his advances because they are only rejected by those who already love someone. The guy says to make the girl love him. Reno claims he knows what it's like to love someone, the part of the heart that doesn't belong to you. He offers her a deal. If they go to the ball together, he will help her in her love. The girl speculated about how, even if they aren't a couple, they could be together in another sense. Aisha thought so a few minutes ago. About Reno, the protagonist noted that he was as good at attacks as she was. Heaps of jewelry, unbelievably beautiful dresses, stylish shoes, a crown of gold. The maids assumed everything was from Reno. Aisha noted that it was not only from him. Expensive silk delivered from across the seas. The maids noted that the shoes given for the protagonist, embroidered with her by the same master, try on beads on her and claimed that these beads of pearls will look on their mistress Aisha just incredible. Jokingly suggested that Reno wants to blow up her room. Aisha kicks all these people out and says enough is enough. Igor mentions how cute the main character is. The girl doesn't understand the point of the glow sticks, and he reminds her that she's a guillotine. Igor was surprised when the manageress summoned him, since she thought Miss Aisha's identity was revealed, but she returned with Mr. Reno. The girl remembered the words Reno spoke, the deal he was offering. If they go to the ball, he would help the girl in her love. She clarified how he could help, but the guy didn't answer. Reno noted if she came to the flower garden tomorrow morning, she would find out everything. But before that, he would send a couple people to her, because it would take a lot of preparation. And so the protagonist now realized what kind of preparation. The girl thinks if she comes out like this, then it will be possible to say that she has gathered her thoughts. Aisha turns around and loudly tells Igor to get ready to go out. He happily agrees. The girls sitting at the table are discussing about the heavenly knight Reno. One says to another she heard that he declined Mrs. Haven's invitation to be her partner. And another mentioned that every time she hears this from the carriage coming home, there is a scream. Almost all the girls have already managed to confess their love to him. The girls continue to discuss that the Count is waiting for someone. Although he always appears later than the girl, the other one began to wonder who he is waiting for. The girls turn their heads and open their mouths in surprise. They see a strangely dressed girl looking for an entrance. Aisha goes on a monologue about how hard it is to get here, navigating only by map. The girl is noticed by Reno and is glad she came. She also apologizes for being late. The main character puts her hand to her forehead, dressed in a captain's uniform, and says that she is Aisha Lidberg from the 5th Division of Knights, a nurse of the Imperial Palace, addressing him as Mr. Reno, a heavenly knight. The guy smilingly looks at Aisha and notices that she clearly didn't like what he sent. The girl replies to him that since she was honored to be alone with Mr. Reno, she thought it would be logical to wear a uniform. The guy has heard enough and offers her a seat at the table. Aisha hears the gossip all over the garden, but for her the most important thing is that it doesn't look like a date. The guy continues his dialogue with her and mentioned that if everything is okay, he would like to hear her thoughts on his gift. Smiling, she replied that it was noisy. Reno needed to know if Aisha was ready to handle it. The protagonist thinks about being hidden by the fancy clothes, with the pressure from the constant attention here. This is how he would feel the rest of his life if he was with the captain. For the girl, everything became clear. This was her test. Aisha noted that she could feel the stares of others on her, and it didn't matter what she was wearing. Reno suggests that he stole her partner's position. The girl agreed with that. The guy asks that she calm down a bit and claims that if it weren't for him, Ren Brecht wouldn't have gone to the prom with the main character. Reno went there alone and noted the fact that Ren is not someone who likes to play around. In the 12 years that the Count has known him, you can count on your fingers how many times Ren Brecht has been to the ball, and he's been alone at all of them. Reno mentioned that the girl is an aristocrat, going on to say that coming to a ball without a partner means going against etiquette. So Ren has never been to a ball as a nobleman. After all, he is the commander of the knights, who even there stays by His Highness's side, finishing his monologue by mentioning that Ren is always in uniform standing guard. Aisha thinks about the fact that Ren Brecht is called the Mad Dog Emperor for a reason, but when he made an offer, the girl could not refuse. Reno knows that even though he's the leader, the proposal to the protagonist shook him up. Reno mentioned that Aisha is the first girl summoned to the captain's office for a private meeting, so he interrupted it, because he knew that it had never happened before. The girl doesn't understand how this connects her to him. The Count took her hand, continuing the story that Ren Brecht is a complicated man who is easy to attack, if in himself he can, but only if Aisha unites with Reno. The guy says he's serious, so even when the girl goes to the ball with him, he'll be sincere. Reno talks about Aisha using him to get the captain. He's sure she can. One night, Ren Brecht pulls out a book about the history of the Imperial Knights. It's a book that tells the story of 1,000 years since the Emperor and the Knights of the Emperor's protector. And then his servant turns to him and points out that he suddenly found this book. And in the moment, Ren remembers Aisha looking him in the eye and shouting that all this is not nonsense, and the traitor is really alive. Ren thought he should check something, and reads in the book the name of Kalisha, a village near the coast, known not only for its scenery, but also for its tropical fruits, a unique sweet that is served as a delicacy, a fruit tree called Aisha. Notices that the sheets in the book are torn off, and he asks his assistant about where the book was kept. The servant replied that it was kept in the royal palace. Ren noted that if that was the case, he would have to restrict access to everyone. His assistant took the book and wondered who could have done this, a collection belonging to the royal palace, and remarked that it was really strange. Ren says that because there were signs of treason, the whole village disappeared. From the map to the records, the guy doesn't believe that the emperor could order such a thing. Ren wants to ask his servant to investigate something. His subordinate doesn't mind. Ren asks that he find out about the book and if anyone other than his aide took it. Count Reno says for Aisha to use it to get Ren Brecht. He noted that he would be happy to be her advantage. The girl replied that she would not do such a cowardly thing. The guy pointed out that it is not cowardly, but the protagonist pointed out that testing love with a trial to prove it. As a guillotine, there are rules to be followed during the game, and the essence of all strategies is to go through everything by yourself. Aisha's thoughts are that her pride will not allow her to accept help from anyone. The protagonist tells him that they are quite similar to Count Reno and are suitable as rivals for each other, but she has to refuse his help. After saying goodbye to him, she abruptly ran away, and he sat there confused and not realizing what he had done wrong. What was the name of the feeling that Reno was experiencing? The guy reasoned that it makes no difference what he sees or feels the name of this blind feeling, Aisha. Reno sat at the table and thought about her, dreamed about her, and realized the fact that it was his defeat. Igor happily asked Aisha how everything went. She reluctantly answers. The guy is interested in what dress she wore to the ball and how they will celebrate the wedding, mentions for the kids. And then Igor remembers that exactly in their time, couples often do not have a child. The girl did not want to hear all this. Aisha says she won't go to the ball with Reno. At the ball, let alone the wedding, Igor worried that the girl might have hit Mr. Reno and began to describe that he was a talented man, willing to help, but such a jewel. Igor noted as he thought, she was born with the royal mark. He asked her what she meant about not being satisfied with the position of a knight with the title of Earl. Igor noted that if it is a higher status than Mr. Reno, then it turns out that Mrs. Aisha aspires to the position of regimental commander. The girl answers him that he is only thinking about how to get her together with someone else, which is true, because Igor is in the NPS, in the game simulator of love relationships. The protagonist thinks that in any case, to go to the ball, she needs a partner, and the idea of going together with Igor arises. Aisha offers the guy to go to the ball with her. Igor is shocked by the surprise and says that Igor is an NPC, an abbreviation of a non-player auxiliary character to advance the plot of the game. Aisha points out that it won't affect the game in any way, mentioning that he deserves to get there. He just needs a partner. Then she could go to the ball because she doesn't have to make it to the finals. And Igor at that moment was only interested in why she refused Mr. Reno and Garina's. Igor, as a servant, has to refuse Mrs. Aisha, mentioning that unfortunately they cannot continue, and immediately quite asked, how about the dress? She wondered the guy if she had to wear a dress. Guy remarked to show appreciation to the divisional nurses. Aisha had been chosen to represent them. Igor was pleased that His Majesty had accepted her, and he reminded her that the girl couldn't embarrass herself in front of the king. Aisha noted that it means to buy a dress and asked what Igor's salary is. The guy said about 180 shillings a year. The girl said that with that money, you could barely buy napkins, and wondered how you could live on that. He replied that an imperial knight is an honorable role where money doesn't matter. Igor said he had one and presented her with a beautiful green dress. The girl took it, started looking at it, and remembered that she was wearing it when she left Garthia. Igor says that on the day when the protagonist turned 14, it was prepared for the party. But Lady Aisha chose the form of a knight instead of the dress he recommended. The protagonist stood with a surprised look, and Igor said that now they know that there is no other way but to fix it. Suddenly, they heard fireworks outside the window. The imperial ball is an event where the king reminds everyone of the achievements of those who serve the country, and the nobles engaged in war stick their heads out. The Brecht family should be most proud. Arthur Brecht is a former knight commander who helped the king in politics and diplomacy. Next to him is Ren Brecht, the current knight commander and heir to the Earl family. Arthur indicated that he would go first, wondering to Ren if he had anyone to greet before the ball. Ren understood. The boy noticed Arthur greeting Lady Louise. Ren Brecht reminisces about his servant finding everything. Ren asked if he could tell him. The servant noted that the book only went to one place besides the royal palace, only to the Brechts. The lad was surprised, for who but he could take a book related to the history of the knights? Ren Brecht said that the clues point to Louise, but they are not enough, and then suddenly appears Reno and addresses him as a commander, and that they met again with him. Ren thought it was a joke. Well, Reno pointed out that today, he was sure he could understand the feelings of a close friend. Ren didn't realize whose feelings. Count Reno pointed out that he is so serious. After all, Reno is trying to follow the loyalty of a friend who guards His Majesty, even at the ball. Reno wondered why Aisha had changed her mind so suddenly, and the Count replied that it was probably because of a broken heart. The Count clarified that the guy was surprised at being rejected, or at his pain. Ren replied that it was all of the above. Ren Brecht asked who Aisha had traded the Count for. He replied that if he was so interested, let him see for himself. They turn their heads and see a beautiful Aisha in a green dress walking happily with Igor. Ren clearly did not expect such an event. The main character is surprised from the beauty she observes and prevented people from leaving the palace. The girl apologized for the inconvenience. Aisha was called by Igor, and she wondered where he disappeared so abruptly. The guy offered her a drink of wine and said that he would pour her expensive wine from Shanum. The girl asked him how much he had drunk, and he said 6 glasses. Aisha is shocked and reminds Igor that today is an important day to restore her honor. And he got drunk first. Aisha asked him to come to his senses. The guy claimed that there are free drinks here. Aisha suddenly shifted her attention to some woman. She turned to the girl and noted the fact that Igor is an unsuccessful partner. The protagonist didn't expect someone to talk to her and thought that Igor should have warned the girl if someone wanted to talk to her. Ada asked the woman who she was. The woman apologized to Aisha for not introducing herself right away and replied that she was the Countess of the Stenbock family. Stenbock murmured Louise, simply Louise to everyone. Aisha realizes that she immediately met the final boss and starts to reassure herself it must be a coincidence. But as soon as the protagonist showed up, this woman spoke to her with pity. Probably Aisha is an enemy to her son. Louise says that when the protagonist rejected her son, she thought that Aisha would bring someone worthy. And then the girl realizes that it's definitely not a coincidence. Aisha said that she just didn't deserve a chance to get here. So she exaggerated everything, and that usually as an honorary member of the Knights of the Palace, parallel to this moment, when Aisha and Louise were talking, Igor threw up next to them. Louise remarked to the girl not to be nervous because she had come to meet her, and because Aisha didn't ignore her invitation, she had to appear in person. Aisha was surprised and didn't understand the invitation. Then she remembered that someone had visited her recently and realized that she had ignored the Countess. The Countess congratulated Aisha and mentioned that she had heard that she had been recognized by His Majesty. The girl responded with gratitude. Louise pointed out that there was no need for thanks. Louise began saying that it would be a great pleasure to destroy him at such an opportune time. The Galgut Empire is a major power that accounts for most of Kalisia's trade. Louise thinks that celebrating such a country becoming an enemy is rather amusing. And Aisha interrupts her and argues that the unilateral plundering of the Galgoth has harmed the citizens. The woman agrees and continues that the lives of the rulers are far more important than the lives of the citizens, and she should realize that they mean a lot. Louisa says that after this defeat, the Galgut refused to mend relations with Kalisia, and perhaps this ball is the country's last celebration. The woman notes that it's not very nice that Aisha is decorating for the last night, but nevertheless, she's thinking about giving the girl a chance to escape. Louise tells her to get out of her sight, and then she'll have a quiet and peaceful life, and she ends by noting that's all she wanted to say to Aisha. An unexpected proposal to the Countess, an option that hasn't appeared before. The protagonist thinks about how it's really possible because there is variation in the game. The protagonist remembers that this is the activity that Igor was talking about, and the girl wants to disobey her. Aisha replies to the Countess that she rejects her offer and says that imperial knights fight for the citizens, as do nurses. Aisha pointed out that her partner, who she laughed at, is also a hero who has saved many lives. And being a hero, he doesn't care where he was born. The girl mentioned that her colleagues recognize her for her diligent work, and she is ready to bear the brunt of this fame. Louise looked at her and said that she remembered the same kind of herself when she was young. She came from not the most prestigious family, but she had no fear. The Countess fought for what she believed in, and there were plenty of guys obsessed with her. If it wasn't for her son, she would have liked Aisha. Louise said it was a good ending, clinked glasses with her and left. Aisha thought they were safely done talking and she felt like she could do anything. Suddenly, Ren Brecht appeared and claimed that she was here. The girl did not understand what she was talking about. The guy said that he was informed that someone was tarnishing the honor of the knights and decided that he should come himself. Telling all this, he looked at Igor lying on the floor. Aisha replied that Igor was drunk, even though he had asked to accompany her, and asked that he be put away. Renbrecht replied that they shouldn't do that to his guys, they should just take him home. Aisha starts flirting with him and asked him if she was one of his guys, giving him a slight push in his direction. The girl inquired when he started to limit himself to something, complimenting that neither the commander nor the main character has a partner. Ren agreed with the girl. The music plays. At the ball after the bell rings, couples always start their first dance. Aisha does not understand whether it is a joke or fate, because now Renbrecht is standing in front of her. The girl feels as if she is a little drunk, and at this moment turns to Ren with a proposal to dance with her. She asked if he can dance. He said that he can, and she offers to see what skills he has, with the suggestion that they try dancing together. Of course, Aisha is not that good a dancer, but she doesn't want to miss out on a moment like this. Whether she is capable of dancing enough to be lucky enough not to step on his foot is what she was thinking when she was a guillotine. But now she is Aisha. There comes the announcement by one of the servants, the star of Kalisha, the great Queen 27, I ruler Katrina de Jeravaz Amidala. And out comes the queen. Aisha notices Ren paying attention to her, and the guy immediately noted that Her Majesty is here. The protagonist asked the guy to wait and took his hand and asked about whether he remembered what he promised her. Promised the girl about the surviving traitor, reminded her of what he said, that he would listen to her even for a different price. The game would be over soon, no matter the first, second, or third time. Aisha thought she wanted to tell everything with a smile and offered to dance with her one last time, and that would be his payment. It seemed to the protagonist that Ren might say she was stupid or just snort and walk away, but he kissed her hand and left after that. The balls can be counted on the fingers on which Renbrecht has been, and among them not once has he come with a partner. The girl is seen greeting the queen, and now she understands what Count Reno meant. Renbrecht's partner has always been Queen Catherine, one single person. Suddenly a bird flies into the window. One of the servants picks it up and sees that it has a wounded wing and appeals to the queen. She uses her magic power, after which the bird immediately recovers and flies out of the window completely healthy. The queen casually says that everyone continues to enjoy the banquet and says that peace will come to all who came to their banquet. And everyone who has the royal mark has this power. Aisha also used this power to become a nurse, but she never revealed it to anyone, to hide her identity. But the queen is different because the power symbolizes her authority. If the queen is the light, she is the shadow. Ren asked the queen how she was feeling. She said she was fine. Aisha saw this, and at that moment Count Reno enters the palace and gets a lot of female attention. But he was without a companion, noting that he was waiting for someone. Reno noticed Aisha running out of the palace. He follows her and sees her sitting on her knees crying. The guy said that now she knows what it's like to have your heart broken. But Aisha didn't say anything back. Reno wanted to take her by the shoulder, but she shrieked sharply, asking if she wanted to play. Igor always said that a story changes depending on how free it is. Herines died. Lady Louise appeared in front of her. The protagonist kept bumping into Renbrecht, who, according to the system, should not be encountered. She recalls that he even kissed her hand himself. In the game, because of loyalty, cannot attack. But Aisha just so was not going to retreat, because in her vocabulary there are no such words as cannot attack. The girl just could not yet attack the character. Once Aisha tells the truth about herself, Ren's loyalty will end. She turns around and yells at Reno and asks for his help, because above all, the girl needs at least one person to be on her side. He graciously takes her hand and agrees to help her and asks her what she wants, saying that his position, honor, and heart belong to Aisha. Asking her if she could say that they had made a contract like that. Aisha asked, what kind of contract? He says what the protagonist called a cowardly act, and leans towards her, and the guy's face is near the girl's face. The protagonist pointed out that in order to confirm his love, he has to put her to the test. Reno replied that he couldn't promise, but he took her hands and said that he couldn't give his beloved to someone else. The girl took her hand from his and distanced herself. He thoughtfully pointed out that the terms of the contract showed her to be onerous. Such cooperation with Reno is like a double-edged sword, but Aisha does not know what this situation will turn into, and there is no Igor, who would be able to advise her in this case. The only thing that can be said is that this cunning knight is on her side. Suddenly, the girl remembers Igor's words, who told Aisha that whether it was support or desire, she should use it, because all she has is a royal branch, perseverance, and popularity for some unknown reason and nothing else. is the only way to use love. Professionals use different approaches depending on their opponents, ponders the protagonist, and that rational persuasion doesn't work, she knows since Herene's. The protagonist tells Reno to give up because she and he can't be together. The girl comes out of this situation with dignity, tactics, and determination. The guy asks Aisha if Aisha has any other problems besides her heart. She confirms that she does. Suddenly, Reno gets on his knee and says that even if the Knight of Blue Sky Russell Reno will make a vow in life. The girl starts to think that the oath of life can only be made to the queen, which means that Reno is really serious about her. And in a class society, there's probably only one upside. And the plus is that Aisha can continue to hide behind her identity, and she once again mentioned to Reno that they can't be together because she is a queen that he will have to protect as a knight of the imperial palace. The guy didn't understand what she said, and Aisha repeated again, that he is a knight and has to protect her next queen, so she can't accept his love. Reno thinks the heartbreak is such a big wound for her, but she realizes it's an obvious reaction to her words. Then she asks for forgiveness and asks for just a second. He doesn't understand what she's talking about. Aisha removes the gloves from her hands and puts it to Reno's eyes, and he starts to suddenly see. His vision has returned, and the girl told him to raise his head and look at his mistress. His loyalty now belongs not to his love, but to the queen. So Aisha allows him Bertrand Russell Reno to become her knight. The protagonist proclaimed Reno as her knight. He confusedly bent his head and said yes. She joyfully remarked that it was excellent and let them do it. The girl suggested that in the future, they should do it properly and reminded him that he might have leg cramps, asked him to stand up. The protagonist asked if everything was okay, and she understood that it was hard to focus so suddenly and mentioned that she would help him. Aisha wanted to ask something. The guy pointed out that he could ask anything. The girl said that she knew Reno had been to many balls, but she figured he still hadn't danced once, and she wondered how he entertained. Reno replied that he didn't know, and as in his opinion a ball is just a place to socialize with people. She asked if she could invite him to the first dance. He hesitantly agreed. The girl said it's okay, and no matter how clumsy he is, he will never be worse, and her, the protagonist, took the guy's hand and they entwined in a dance. The guy said that Aisha has already captured his heart and asked what else she wants from him. The girl said that she doesn't want his love as a man, but wants his loyalty and respect as a knight. To use his powers as her sword because they are going to rebel soon, Reno said that Lady Aish should not be at the ball, and she replied that she is here now, and it is right. The girl admits to him that she pretended to be overly noble, but her leadership skills are a total mess. They laugh together and have fun. The guy puts his eye mask back on. Aisha asks if he's really going to use it again. The guy replies that it's the darkness he's lived in for about 10 years, and going back wouldn't be a problem for him. Reno mentions that the rebellion has to start in an unexpected way, so no one can imagine it. To do that, they need to keep their secrets, and asks Aisha if she's ready. So the two of them are back at the palace again, and Reno says that Queen Catherine gave Gardia a gift, and asks Aisha what they can do now. The girl, seeing the queen, puts her white gloves back on her hands. Queen Catherine comes out and says that they are gathered in this place today to celebrate the return of the imperial knights, and also to show their gratitude to the people who believed in her and explored after her. Queen Catherine hopes that they will enjoy the great celebration without any problems. And finally, Queen Catherine finishes with the details of the recent events. The queen calls out to the heroes of Kalisha to commend them for their bravery and asks them to stay with them until the end. Queen Catherine begins to reward the merchants who gave away their wealth, the isolated imperial knights, the fishermen who gave them boats to cross the sea, and asks to speak on behalf of honor to the imperial palace knights. Rent, Rest, Demarcus Colmar. Rent comes up to her, and she hangs him a badge, and Aisha observes all this. Further continues on behalf of the honor knights who helped the wounded, let Aisha Lidberg come forward. The protagonist thinks about the fact that she will be so close to Ren, and it's such a coincidence. But Reno stands behind her and reassures her, saying that everything will be fine. He will take care of everything downstairs, so let her boldly continue. Aisha replies that she can, and asks that it's just a rebellion, and then they cross eyes with Reno. He walks back and she walks up the stairs and looks back at the guy. and the queen turns to her and says that she would like Aisha to come closer to her because she can't give her jewelry. Finally, Aisha meets her enemy, and it's Queen Catherine. The queen wanted to put a badge on Aisha, but it caught fire for some reason, and Catherine looked at the protagonist in surprise, and it seemed to her that the queen understood everything. Aisha piles on Catherine to protect her, and in a moment the servant who wanted to intervene is hit in the head with an arrow. It was an attempted assassination of the queen. The heroine is shocked at the turn of events. Someone tried to kill the queen? Aisha tells Katerina to keep still, for it is not safe, and let her keep her head down. On the other hand, the heroine does not understand why she is doing this and tries to help her enemy. The queen looks at Aisha and says that she is the savior, and said that she has finally come. Then suddenly Lady Louise appears, and Aisha remembers her warning about how she said to run to a place where she can't find her, because that's the only way to survive in this world. Aisha realized that Louise knew this was going to happen. Everywhere she went, she tried to kill her. Then when Aisha went up to get the reward, but the Countess risked the queen's life as well, the girl wondered why. The protagonist wondered what would happen to all her saved data. If she died right now, in the moment Aisha remembers Rainy Brecht and how he kissed her hand, and how the girl held his hand and panicked that all her progress would be wiped clean. The girl is in a panic and would rather be dead. She yells for the queen to come down. Aisha starts to say goodbye with all her data, thinking she's going to die. But with her back, she and the queen are blocked by Ren Brecht, and the arrow hits him right in the shoulder. Ren says that they need to get the queen to safety right now. He points out that they need to take the path that leads to the forest, and the queen anxiously asks if he's okay. The guy replies that he's fine, and they need to get the queen out of the palace. But then the arrows fly again. They run and end up in the forest, and Aisha is worried about Ren and whether he is okay. She touches his shoulder and thinks that the arrow was poisonous. Queen Katrina is not walking fast either because she is worried about Ren, Aisha thinks, which she should worry about, and that she can't let her choice lead to another death. Remembering Jerinus, they hear someone handing out orders to the knights who are looking for the queen, and they should be ordered to take the queen alive, and the same goes for Grandmaster Renate, and the red-haired girl can be killed. The man with the knights tells Queen Katrina to stay where she is. He said he will keep her alive if the queen goes with them now, and orders them to drop their weapons and raise their hands. And then the men notice that Reno starts to slowly draw his sword. But suddenly, Aisha comes flying out with sword in hand and says that the man was caught. But he pointed out that she was a fool, and if the protagonist ran away, they would spare her puny life. Aisha isn't really a very good swordsman. She's just a healer after all. She was afraid of dying in this game. But then Ren's voice sounded. He told them to wait. They turned around and out came suddenly some man in a suit. Aisha thought he looked familiar, and Ren addressed him as his father. Aisha realizes then the man is Arthur Brecht, a former Grandmaster, and his soldiers are dressed in the uniform of the duchy. Ren screams that this is treason. His father Arthur replies that his son is wrong, and this is revolution. Calling some lowlife a king while he has the royal mark is such an absurd custom. Yet the royal knighthood protected the queen and served her until that war, Arthur pointed out. He looks at Ren and says that his son is now the heir, and he should rule this country by his side. Ren Brecht is just furious, and says that it's just hundreds of sacrifices for a great cause. The guy kneels down, takes the sword supplies to his father Arthur's throat, and points out that this is what he was thinking when he killed all the people in Garthay. Arthur says that he always doubted it, saying that a queen who would start a war to save hundreds of lives would destroy an entire city because of one single traitor. Ren said that when he found out that he was Grand Master at the time, he immediately understood, and Ren claimed that Arthur was behind the massacre. And then Arthur's ball swung, and Ren was on the ground. Aisha was concerned about his situation, and Arthur said he was a foolish boy and would have spared him if the boy had gone quietly with him. Arthur addressed Aisha as the bearer of the royal mark, and he didn't forget her mentioning that she wouldn't be able to fool him even if she tried to hide it with gloves. Aisha remembers that if she had died then, none of this would have happened. The girl realizes that it was Arthur who was behind the massacre at Garthia. Arthur asks Aisha where the queen is. The girl claims she's long gone while he was busy chasing them and replies that he should. Arthur says that's the wrong answer and emphasizes that it's okay, and they can find the queen themselves. Now let him accept his miserable fate and die. But just as he swung to kill Aisha, Queen Katrina appeared and said that she had arrived, and now let him let Aisha and Ren leave. Arthur said he didn't expect anything more from the most noble of them all. He knew that Katrina would not run away at the expense of their lives. The queen apologizes to Aisha for failing to do what she told her to do. The queen says that she never backs down, and then suddenly Count Reno appears and apologizes for being late. My Lady Katrina says that she orders Reno to protect Aisha at the cost of his life. Suddenly, Arthur presents a sword to Catherine's throat, and everyone panics, but the queen tells them not to worry, because the Duke is not stupid enough to kill the reigning queen. In parting, the queen notes that they will meet soon. Arthur orders them to take Reno, but he doesn't understand why his knights aren't attacking the Earl, and he replies that Arthur underestimates him. Reno asks Aisha to look away from him, and he says he was present at the war and the girl knows it, and he has seen his share of bloodshed. Count Reno says to admire it through their eyes and look at how her knight dances and starts a fight with his ball. Soon he defeats everyone. Obviously, Count Reno's skill, wielding a ball, is much better than dancing. And then Aisha turns to him and says he must save the queen. He replies to the girl that his queen is her. Aisha admits that she was wrong, and Duke Arthur was behind the massacre, and he was the one who committed treason. Reno said that the Duke is a very public figure. He would never dare to act so rashly. Suddenly, the knights saw them and started shouting that they were traitors and tried to capture them. Aisha wondered why they were traitors and that they were addressing them. The Duke blamed them for everything. Then they couldn't let themselves be captured. Aisha says that they can't leave Reno in such a state. Aisha asks that Reno carry him to the other side of this path not far away, and told them to go from there quickly. They were stopped by the knights and yelled not to be allowed to leave. Reno says that Aisha should go first, and the girl says that there are too many of them, and it wouldn't be easy for even him to handle them. The guy replies that he can do anything for his queen, but then she sees Igor arrive and turns to her. He says he's a little late but has come to save everyone. Aisha is shocked that he drove the car drunk. She climbs into the car and yells for Igor to come to them faster. And here they are driving, and she tries to bring Ren to his senses. But the bleeding does not stop. Count Reno says that this is clearly an unusual poison, and soon he may just die. Then there is the only way to save him. Aisha apologizes to Ren, but she has to pull out the arrow and it will hurt, and she takes the arrow that is in his shoulder and pulls it out sharply. The girl pulls it out, saying, "Ready." Aisha wishes there was a disinfectant somewhere, and suddenly Igor suggested wine for that. But she replied that wine would not be good for that. The main character starts to use her magic power to cure Reno, and she succeeded. She told him that everything would be fine, but the guy was still unconscious. Aisha turns to him to check on him, but he wasn't breathing. Count Reno is in a panic, saying it can't be. The protagonist tries to remember the first aid training she had at work. Aisha noted that it is necessary to put him in a comfortable position. When a person stops breathing, to open his airways by tilting his head back and lifting his chin. It is necessary to pinch his nose and make artificial respiration. The girl realizes that this is part of her job and she is going to become a nurse saving people and decides to give him CPR. Aisha can't let him die like that. The protagonist does CPR and thinks that she can't let her favorite character die. The girl hasn't even won his heart. Abruptly, his eyes open. She was startled out of surprise and apologized to him. Ren Brecht came to his senses and asked what she was doing, and claimed that the girl had taken advantage of a man who was unconscious. How shameless of her, he claimed. Aisha asked him not to think anything like that. She, just out of curiosity, asked if it was his first kiss. He got embarrassed and didn't say anything. The girl turns to Count Reno and asks if Ren Brecht had a girlfriend or fiancé. The guy replied that there were a few engagement proposals, but he never heard of a romantic relationship. Reno said that one of the laws of chivalry obliges to be chaste, and then the girl remembered that indeed his office is very modest. Reno honors the queen conventionally. She is a goddess. Aisha realized that he looks like a reaper. Reno asks what they are whispering about. Aisha replied that it is nothing. He asked her if Queen Catherine is okay. The girl replied that she is not injured, but the Duke kidnapped her. Reno said she was a knight and protecting Her Majesty was her sacred duty. And she was just standing there watching her queen being kidnapped. The guy said he would like to hear her explanation. The girl replied that she had no explanation and said that a nurse's priority is always those who are in critical condition, so she did her duty. He looked at her and didn't know what she was talking about since he couldn't see the marks from the wounds on his body. Reno asked that Her Highness helped him, and he couldn't even protect her. He thought it was Catherine who saved him. Aisha was relieved, for if he knew that the protagonist was trying to overthrow his adored queen to take her place, she had no idea how he would have reacted. Aisha said that they should go back and save the queen, because they are the best swordsmen in all of Kalesia. Reno replied that he cannot. They cannot get out of the palace. The Duke had it all planned out. They are already looking for them. He just told the guards to be more careful. Aisha replied that stop making a tragedy. After all, Reno survived the infection, and he has tons of accomplishments as a knight. He defeated 10 million soldiers. Aisha asked why he was worried and told him not to worry, because it's only a duke and he can handle it. Reno asked how she knew so much about him. She replied that she remembered all his backstory from the manual in the game. The girl offered to save the queen and said she had an idea. A carriage pulls up to the palace and the guards approach them to check their luggage. They look in the window and see Igor there. He starts to say that his favorite lady Bianca is there. He wants to hug her since they haven't seen each other for so long. Aisha answers the guards that it seems that her master has had too much to drink and apologizes, because they left the ball early to avoid a scene, but on the way home they got lost. The guards let them through, and they passed and were able to exhale, for they almost got caught. Aisha tells the boys to get up, as the horizon is clear, and Igor can't believe he's been honored to ride with the strongest knights in the kingdom. The main character thought they wouldn't find out who Igor was, and is glad it worked. Igor replied that he didn't know Aisha was such an amazing actress. He asked her to return his cloak since he was cold, and she was borrowing it from him to hide her appearance in front of the guards. Aisha said that the storylines of the game end after the ball, and she asked Igor what happens now. He said he wasn't sure, but now the whole story depends on her. Igor said that her unexpected actions changed the course of history. Aaron is dead, so his mother, Lady Louise, hates her. Igor continued that it's the same story with Duke Arthur. He's a grand master, so he's always chasing social status. He didn't like that her queen gave Aisha a commoner a medal for bravery. He said no wonder they decided to unite against the queen. Igor said if Aaron hadn't died and Aisha hadn't gotten the medal, nothing would have changed, and he says that the troubles are because of her. The girl felt like punching him at that moment. The butterfly effect, like a light flap of wings, can cause a typhoon. The slightest change has huge consequences, and Aisha was the cause of it all. The girl recalls Queen Catherine turning to her as a savior and being glad she was here. Aisha responds to Igor that, if it was her fault, she could put things back to normal. Aisha says to teach Duke Arthur a lesson and save the queen. They decide to leave the palace, but they can't run far. Ren and Reno form both of them needed to pack. Aisha asked Igor for one more favor. He gladly agreed. The girl asked him to strip, for they had come up with one more plan. They drove into some town, met a parishioner there, asking and apologizing for the fact that they arrived so late and whether there would be a room for them. The heroine noticed that they had the luggage of an aristocrat. She replied that she did not think they had anything suitable for a room for them, but Aisha asked to hurry up, for they were in a hurry. Suddenly, Igor came out in a green dress, pretending to be a princess and asking why fate had played such a cruel joke on him, crying into Ren's shoulder. He talked about how his father, Baron, wouldn't let them be together because his man was a merchant and they had eloped a year ago. Igor continued his monologue about them being robbed on their way home. The girls stood in shock that they were robbed and that they ran away. They asked to be allowed to stay to clean up, for they couldn't even go home looking like that. The parishioner, listening to all this, replied that of course she was glad to welcome them to their humble inn, and she invited them in, mentioning that they should tell her their whole story, addressing Igor as a nice lady, and he replies about how nice it was of her and thanks her. The next day they walked through the city amongst the people, the three of them in black cloaks and Igor in a woman's green dress. They marveled at how many people there were. Aisha asked that Igor keep his voice down. Aisha noticed how people were discussing the portraits hanging on the wall. And there were pictures of them, all three of them. People were talking about how it was treason, how hard it was to believe since their queen had been so kind. People keep saying that they are vile traitors for kidnapping their queen, and these posters say that if anyone sees them to contact Duke Arthur immediately. Aisha is surprised that the posters are hanging because it's been less than a day. In that case, they could have been recognized, so they better go back. Igor told the protagonist to look at those horrible portraits, saying that there was a girl like her hanging on them. Aisha covers Igor's mouth with her hand to keep him quiet. Aisha turns around and doesn't realize where Ren is. He was just behind her and she suddenly saw him and asked him to change. The girl turned to him and asked him where he got those clothes from. Maybe it was a stash or something. Ren answered that medals are paid well in pawn shops. They are adored because sometimes they are studded with precious stones. The protagonist was surprised that he sold them because they are a symbol of honor. He has been protecting them all his life. He replied that the knight who could not protect his mistress, there is no honor. He said that he would buy them back when he knew that the queen was safe. Aisha noticed that he had sold his medals, but the sword was with him. And then Reno addressed Ren about how he plays by the rules all the time and it's trouble. Ren replied that he had sold his medals as well. The guy was furious since he didn't ask him. Ren replied that true friends are always together in hard times. Aisha pondered on how they can save the queen, since they are known by sight, asked if anyone has a friend they can trust. Reno replied that he would take care of it, but Aisha said she didn't mean ex-passengers. The protagonist turned to Ren. Perhaps of his acquaintances can be trusted, he thinks, and talks about them picking up the luggage from the tavern and said to meet behind the square. Aisha asked if he had an idea. He said yes, his fiancée did. Aisha didn't know that he had a fiancée or that he was engaged, that it was all a vow with rings. The girl was furious because he hadn't said anything to her about it. Igor asked a direct question about how long he had been engaged. Reno replied that engagement is meaningless because his family did it. But because of the change in the political situation, it was dissolved. Reno said that his fiancée was Lady Juliana. Reno asked that it was the Countess family. He replied that she was the daughter of Grand Duke Carlin, one of the employees of the Gargoth Empire. The Gargoth Empire had attacked Kalesia a year ago, a Grand Duchy, a neutral territory. Reno thought about how that's why they went there, and Aisha worried about it not being safe. The protagonist thought that the Grand Duke was their enemy, and going there for another half day would be better for Ren to rest and suggested to him. But he just ignored her. They were heading into enemy territory. Aisha didn't believe she was going to make it, and fell asleep sweetly on Reno's shoulder. She was woken up by a voice saying her name, and it was Ren. The guy said they had just arrived in the Great Duchy. Ren replied that it was a long way to Juliana's estate, so could still rest. She was surprised that he offered her to rest on his shoulder and that she drooled on his shirt. So they all arrive and are met by a servant. He greets them and tells them that her ladyship has been expecting him since he received the letter, and invites them into the palace. They walk through and look at the beauty, Igor telling Aisha to look at one silver candlestick that is worth more than she could earn in a lifetime. Suddenly, some girl comes down and addresses Ren. Aisha notices that this girl has shiny golden curls and flawless porcelain skin. She has graceful feet that are visible from under her red dress, and this was Ren's fiancée. She appeared small, just like a doll. She ran into Ren's arms. She was happy to see him. He addressed her like a lady and asked if she was okay, and then they saw it was a baby. Reno said that he told her that Duke Arthur would accomplish what he wanted by any means necessary. Aisha thought that meant that if the war hadn't started, he would have married the baby. Aisha never imagined she would be so grateful for the war, and this girl asked Ren about him coming to marry her, and Ren replied that he came to meet her father. Her father is the Great Duke of Countess, and this man whose great duchy is neutral territory. And so out comes the Marquis. Aisha noticed at once that he looked familiar. The girl remembered that it was the man of the final battle with the Gargoth Empire. The knight who fought with Ren was defeated in that bloody war. 2 mistakes won't fix anything. pointless deaths are unnecessary. Saving someone is a prerequisite for a good ending. But Aisha didn't know that the blonde man she saved was a great duke. The Marquis turns to Ren that he heard the news and said that he had gotten himself into trouble, saying that he didn't want to bother him, but that's just the way things are. The Marquis turned to the servant to escort them to their chambers and asked that they be treated as special guests, and noted Aisha, telling her to be especially nice to the lady. Marquis mentioned that the girl had no idea how often he thought of her red curls. Marquis said he still remembered so vividly how she had closed Marquis, his sword to his fullest. He kissed her hand and said the mane was as beautiful as ever his heroine, and left. The girl was surprised and asked Igor why he did it. The guy replied that she remembered his words with them their game files, and then she reached the 100th level of attractiveness and became a femme fatale. A femme fatale can seduce any man who is available to conquer her, but soon after, she was caught off guard by the fact that Aisha had maxed out her attractiveness points. Aisha was put into a room. She was happy as it had a soft and comfortable bed, and at least for one much broom she wants to forget about everything and just relax. Some time passed after sinking into sleep, but she is awakened with the words that from a minute to a minute will be a great duke, and the protagonist as a mistress must look good. The protagonist is furious and wonders why this servant girl is calling Aisha his mistress. The girl replies that she knows that the protagonist came as his lordship's mistress, going on to say that he is indeed a ladies' man, but he takes care of all his mistresses. The servant said that they immediately realized she was Lady Ireth after seeing her red curls. They put the protagonist in dresses and ask her to stand straight while they tighten her corset. Aisha, after the corset eating, left the room and met Igor. He greeted her and said he didn't know she liked running around in something like that. The girl replied that everyone thought she was the Grand Duke's mistress. Igor replied that he expected nothing less from the famous guillotine, noting that he was such a seductress. Aisha replied that she hadn't done anything and didn't want any big dramas. Guy noted that she should have thought about it before she scored full points for attractiveness. Guy said that the Grand Duke has only dated redheads since he came back from the war. Igor wonders why he developed such a fondness for redheads. The little princess is practicing her posture by walking with a book on her head and suddenly drops it. The teacher told her that a lady should be benevolent, and she can't emphasize that factor, and continues that if she can't even walk properly, she can dishonor her father's name. The little lady gets angry. Her teacher gives her a warning that it is considered unseemly for a lady to show emotion. So the little lady starts yelling about how Miss Miriam told her that the lady shouldn't run. But there was a lady in pajamas running and pointing her finger at her. The little girl keeps telling Miriam that also a lady shouldn't raise her voice. Parallel to that, Aisha was yelling at Igor. The little girl said she was also hitting that man. The little girl noted that she was beginning to like it. Aisha heard that noble ladies faint easily because of their tight dresses. However, they had nothing to do with it at all. Wearing them would make anyone faint. Suddenly, a girl approached her. Aisha asked the girl to call her Aret. The girl asked her that it was because Aisha was a traitor. The protagonist asked who told her that. The girl said that her father told her that. But he said that she was framed because Aisha was his savior. The protagonist replied that she was pleased and honored. Aisha asked if little milady drinks tea in the morning. She said no, as she is learning proper etiquette. However, she thought her lesson was over for the day. The protagonist was surprised that she is learning etiquette at her age. The girl replied that she has been learning etiquette since she was 4 years old.